The federal government is interested in having Plum Island, which is right out there, become the site for the most dangerous level of biological research. The Department of Homeland Security, which manages the island, is looking at it as the location for a new national bio and agro defense facility. This despite the problems for more than 50 years with the Plum Island Animal Disease Center already located on Plum Island. The new facility would operate at Biosafety Level 4, the highest danger level for biological research. The way the federal government defines it, it involves research into diseases that affect both people and animals for which there are no vaccines or cures. The Department of Homeland Security is bullish about Plum Island as the site for the facility because there's not a lot of livestock hereabouts. On the other hand, Plum Island is smack in the middle of the population center of America, between Boston and New York, just a mile off the northeastern end of Long Island. And there are plenty of people here.
Organization, I wish to express our firm opposition to the construction of the National Agro-Biodefense Facility at Plum Island. Just for the record, Group for the East End is a professionally staffed conservation, advocacy, and education organization dedicated to the protection of Eastern Long Island's fragile and diverse environment. Again, the landscape that existed at the time Plum Island was open in the early 1950s has changed dramatically. The population of Suffolk County has grown 450%. To begin with water consumption and quality, the upgrade will require the consumption of more than 36 million gallons of water per year. The present water consumption is 17 million gallons per year. The 12 freshwater supply wells that draw from Plum Island are already limited in their capacity by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation to help manage the known risk of saltwater intrusion. The installation of the proposed facility would trigger an EPA review to ensure that groundwater is not endangered. We do not believe that the DEIS fully investigated the long-term implications of sustained water consumption on Plum Island's limited freshwater aquifers. To move on to air quality, the DEIS points out that the facility will likely produce something on the order of another 140 tons of combined air pollutants each year and every year for the life of the facility. Our region is already a non-attainment area, and we do not feel that this is a prudent proposal. We do not believe that the DEIS adequately reflected the scope of the potential air quality impacts as they relate to the specific policy objectives of our region. To move on to wastewater, the DEIS points out that the facility would likely produce as much as 50,000 to 125,000 gallons per day of treated sewage that will have to empty out into the Sound, or a sewage treatment facility will need to be constructed.
I'm here just as an individual and a taxpayer. I think that many important scientific points have been made against putting a level 4 facility at Plum Island. I'm going to just say some things that I think are common sense. We live in a time of rising seas. There is absolutely no question that in the next years to come, the seas around us are going to rise. The second is that I'm not old enough to remember the hurricane of 1937. I don't know if anybody else here is of that age, but it tore Fire Island completely in half. Now, we haven't had a really major hurricane here in a very, very long while, but we are due. I think this is a foolish proposal. I think that your work is important. The work that you're doing is important. I think it needs to be done. But it certainly does not need to be done here.
I wanted to specifically talk about the Millstone nuclear reactors that are just 8 miles away from Plum Island. And I confirmed today with the NRC Region 1 that you are in fact in the emergency planning zone. And generally for nuclear reactors, there's 2 ways you can go with emergency planning. You can either evacuate or shelter. And I would like you to address, I haven't seen Millstone addressed in the DEIS at all, whatsoever. So first I would like you to address the fact that Millstone is situated where it is. The island is in the EPZ, and if you're going to shelter workers or if you're going to evacuate them. The other issue is, do you have potassium iodide on the island? So if there is a radiological release from millstone, if there is an accident, that they have access to that, and there are policies and procedures in place to make sure it's distributed to the workers. If your plan is to evacuate, how are you going to secure the island, and more specifically, the pathogens? And I think the fact that there's a nuclear power plant just 8 miles off the coast of Plum Island might be a big red flag and say, well, folks, this isn't the best place to do this. And I, like a lot of other people, I'm not crazy that they're doing Bio-Level Safety 3 work there, but we can live with it, as long as you address the GAO issues that have been brought up by others. And I would just like to say, some people had mentioned the anthrax release, and there was an article in the New York Times, I guess a couple of days ago, and sort of in support of the no action at this time. I'm quoting Keith Rhodes, who was an investigator with the GAO, and this was from his testimony at a congressional hearing in October. Nationwide, an estimated 14,000 people work at about 400 laboratories and have permission to work with so-called select agents, which could be used in a bioterror attack. And he goes on to say, with so many people involved, there is insufficient federal oversight of biodefense facilities to make sure the laboratories follow security rules and report accidents that might threaten lab workers or lead to a release that might endanger the public. So I think there was also an article yesterday in the Washington Post, and it talks about how the Mississippi site was put on the short list, even though it ranked 14 out of 17 of the considered sites. So we're going to have a new administration one way or the other, and I think you should put off making a decision until that time.
Some of us in this room may remember the Ivory soap commercial of years ago. It went something like this. Ivory soap is 99 and 44/100% pure. I've always wondered about the 0.66% that is perhaps unpure. From a safety and health standpoint, I guess my concern is that if there is any risk at all, and nobody has said that we are 100% risk-free, why would we want to expose 110 kids in our school district, K to 6, to any risk that we have control over? Some risks in life we don't have control over, other risks we do have. This is a risk that apparently we have some control over. So that's my question. Why would we want to put kids at risk? Another thought is that I'm told that pathogens are transported by land to the facility. So that means that they go right by our school. I don't know if it's daily or weekly or monthly, but they are transported right past our school.
As the former executive director of the North Fork Environmental Council, I have served on 3 different Plum Island committees on the federal, county, and local levels. There is no disputing the fact that the type of work being done presently on Plum Island, such as the development of cutting-edge diagnostic tools and the creation of vaccines for diseases such as foot and mouth, is essential to national security. But one of the 4 criteria for choosing a site for a Biosafety Level 4 facility is community acceptance. Our elected officials, from all of our federal representatives to State Assemblyman Mark Alessi, who just spoke a little while ago, to Southold Town Supervisor Scott Russell, all of them have stated their opposition to this upgrade, and with good reason. The issue of an upgrade to a Biosafety Level 4 facility at Plum Island has been on the table a number of times over the years, actually since 1999, when we first learned of a proposed upgrade from an article that appeared in the New York Times. Since then, the community at large has been in strong opposition to an increased intensity of use at the Plum Island facility. Fear and mistrust has been a part of the East End for many years, and a history of accidents, unsafe practices, and lack of conforming to federal and state mandated regulations didn't do much to allay the community's fear. Over the years, the USDA at Plum Island was charged with violating both the Federal Clean Water Act and the Federal Hazardous Waste Law. The facility was charged with exceeding water discharge permit limits, operating without an effective discharge permit for a year, storing approximately 5,000 pounds of hazardous chemicals without obtaining a proper storage permit, along with serious OSHA violations. In 1998, the New York State Attorney General's office filed a suit against Plum Island for violating the terms of its wastewater permit over a period of 3 years. In 2000, the USDA was operating 3 incinerators without the required state permits, and New York State DEC cited Plum Island for incinerating regulated medical waste in units that were not permitted for this type of waste management. The DEC documented oil spills that contaminated both soil and groundwater. I believe the cleanup of this particular oil spill is still ongoing. Plum Island's track record on environmental issues isn't great, and today's basic safety and security questions remained. We have been told that an evacuation plan isn't necessary for the North and South Forks, but the community at large believe that one is needed. The issue of an evacuation plan has been raised at numerous meetings over the years. Does the CDC in Atlanta have an integrated emergency management plan for evacuating the surrounding area? Also, I'd just like to mention the no-fly zone. The community has asked for that a number of times too, and that still hasn't been addressed. Given the amount of community concern and opposition to a Biosafety Level 4 facility, I would like to propose that Homeland Security take another look and support and maintain the Level 3 facility on Plum Island with its primary purpose of studying foot and mouth disease and citing the Biosafety Level 4 facility in a more suitable location. Thank you.
It is still unclear whether background checks are being conducted on contractors and visitors entering the biocontainment areas. This is particularly alarming because of the recent news of Dr. Bruce Ivins, a biodefense researcher himself, was responsible for the anthrax attacks in 2001. According to the GAO report, the USDA had no procedure, referring back to 2003, for ensuring that contractors and visitors entering the biocontainment areas did not have criminal backgrounds. GAO recommended background checks for all individuals using a system such as the one used by the National Crime Information Center. The report states that the DHS was developing a memorandum of agreement with the FPS, which is the Federal Protective Service, but had not been finalized due to budget concerns. Has the memorandum of agreement been executed, and are background checks being conducted? The report goes on to state that the DHS has not fully implemented our recommendation that the department ensure that individuals involved in laboratory activities in the biocontainment area, including students and regardless of citizenship, be approved in accordance with the law. Furthermore, background checks are not being conducted on students, and this is a deliberate decision made by the USDA. I'm going to skip over a couple of things that they do require students to do, but any remaining risk, quote, is acceptable according to the USDA. A severe threat to animal health and the economy. I agree strongly with the GAO conclusion that anyone interested in doing harm and who had access to the biocontainment areas could walk away with valuable information, including lab layout procedures, etc., and I do not feel that all of these issues have been thoroughly addressed at this time. I'm prompted to ask who is creating the acceptable risk status of any given security plan which is finally implemented? And number 2, what, if any, directives or legal consequences are in place to guarantee compliance with the GAO's security recommendations, whether or not the facility goes to BSL-4?
As a former director, do you think it's okay for Plum Island to be a BSL-4 facility?
Certainly do. I see no reason it should not be.
Well, the issue is that involves agents that could affect both people and animals, and a lot of people live in this area.
Yes, but none of them reside on Plum Island.
But if there's an accident on Plum Island, and there's been some accidents on Plum Island, that stuff...
Well, I would hope that if there were an accident, the virus would be contained, number 1, and number 2, Plum Island works with animal diseases. It's not a primary place of research for human diseases. However, some diseases, some viruses, infect both animals and man. But those, I can tell you, are worked with in the minority.
Now, Plum Island has been criticized during your tenure as the director and afterwards. Do you think Plum Island has gotten a bum rap?
Oh, I wouldn't want to comment on that.
Well, you think there's been some, what can I say, paranoia or unjustified fear in terms of Plum Island through the years?
Well, I think there's an unjustified uneasiness about possibility of pathogens which are infectious for man, getting from the island to let's say Long Island. However, you must consider that Plum Island is a facility for research on animal diseases, not human diseases. Research on human diseases, including those which are P4, are done at CDC in Atlanta, in the middle of the town of Atlanta, across the street from a motel where I have been a frequent guest.
Do you ever open the windows at that motel, Doctor?
The rooms were air conditioned.
In any event, you feel it's a perhaps safer facility for a BSL-4?
I think it's the safest facility of all of those which they're considering.
I mean, they're considering...
Not that I have visited those other 5, but I have read about them, and I feel that from what I have read, Plum Island is by far the safest facility.
Why?
Because it's not in a livestock area.
But it's not in a livestock area, but it's in an area, well, between Boston and New York, the population center of America.
But Plum Island doesn't work with human diseases. Plum Island works with animal diseases.
But if it's BSL-4, it would work with diseases that affect both animals and people.
Well, I don't share your concern for the safety. I think it's the proper place for Homeland Security to build their new facility.
Supervisor, what do you think about Plum Island becoming a Biosafety Level 4 facility?
I'm against it. I'm certainly supportive of the island in its current format with its current charge and mission as a Bio 3 facility. A Bio 4 facility, that's not the right location for it. We're next to a metropolitan area. The idea of pathogens that have the overwhelming consequences to human population shouldn't be tolerated near a metropolitan area.
Now, one of the arguments as to why it should be on Plum Island is that some of these other finalists in the selection process are in areas where there's a lot of animals, and it could affect livestock in the United States. Well, there's not that much in the way of livestock in this area.
That's right, but yeah, then you have to reconsider why they're considering putting all their research eggs in one basket. In other words, the proposal is for an NBATH facility, this new super research facility. It makes no more sense locating human pathogens on Plum Island than it would to locate hoof and mouth disease in the middle of the cattle population of Texas. That's the proposal that's on the table, is to put all their research eggs in one basket. I'm against that. I haven't seen anything that's environmentally or economically or even science-driven that would suggest that's a good idea. They have separate facilities pursuing separate missions. I think that's worked well historically.
If the Department of Homeland Security, with a mandate to deal with security, says, no, Plum Island is the choice, and President Bush signs off on that before he leaves office, which appears to be the plan in this selection process, what can be done?
I don't know if that's the plan or not. I'm a little bit more optimistic than that. I do think they'll have a process that'll try to find a finalist. I hopefully, in a coming new administration, like to see the whole prospect and idea of an NBATH go away. I don't think it's needed nationally. So.
Well, I mean, not necessarily he's signing off on Plum Island, that could occur, but signing off on one of the 6 finalists. You think it's not going to happen in coming months, as the Department of Homeland Security indicates?
I hope not. Any federal official I've talked to indicates to me that that might not, hopefully will not be the scenario. Of course, if Plum Island is picked and our hand gets forced, we'll pursue what options we can to stop it.
And let me just be a devil's advocate. On these issues of protecting our livestock, protecting against bioterrorism, I mean, all parts of the country are supposed to do their part.
That's right.
What's your argument in terms of your area of Long Island maybe not doing its part?
No, we're doing our part. Plum Island has been a neighbor of ours for 50 years. They serve a vital role. It's still important to this country. It's important to this world. I'm a proud host of Plum Island as a facility in my town. I'm a proud host of their history here. But as a Bio 3 facility, it still serves a vital role. I think it needs to be invested in, and its role expanded under the aegis of a Bio 3 facility.
But Bio 4 is just a line that shouldn't be crossed.
That's off the table for me, yes.
State Senator Ken Lavelle, how do you feel about the Plum Island facility being upgraded to Biosafety Level 4?
Yeah, here we go again, and we've always been opposed to it. I've been opposed to it. Community has been opposed to it. Today we've listened to Plum Island people talk about what they do at level 3, and I'm leaving with some concerns at level 3. We get to level 4, I don't believe there will be an elected official that would support level 4, but I'm speaking for myself and I'm opposed.
What are your issues with level 4? Why are you against it?
Well, I think, we're dealing with very, very serious things. Whether we're talking about Shoreham or other kinds of issues, we are an island, and evacuation, it becomes very, very important. We have an aquifer that we're trying to protect. There are issues about things possibility getting into our water. We've heard today about different things emitted into the atmosphere, even though they're burned at extreme heats. So I think there are a lot of concerns for people in a more populated area. Level 4, it would seem to me, would be acceptable in areas where you literally have lots of miles between the facility and the people. So I don't think this is a good fit for level 4.
The proposed upgrade to biosafety level 4 of your facility would change it a lot, wouldn't it?
Well, basically they're going through a process right now with 6 sites, and they would build a brand new facility, not the facility that we're currently in. So if Plum Island was selected among those 6 facilities, they would build an entirely new laboratory at Plum Island.
Now, as I understand biosafety level 4, it involves diseases that affect both animals and humans for which there are no cures or vaccines?
What you have to understand about biosafety levels is there's 4 different levels. We currently operate under 3 of them at Plum Island right now, and what they're all about is protecting the scientist. And so if we have an unknown agent come in, or we don't know, or we have one come in that kills animals and humans, a biosafety level 4 gives us the ability to protect our scientists. And as we know, emerging pathogens, new diseases coming up, a biosafety 4 would give us the capability to send in a scientist that was reported with an agent that killed people and animals. They could study that.
And the scientists would work in sort of like spacesuit-like garb?
The scientists could choose to either work with a glove box, where you have an enclosed glove box where you go into the facility and stick your hands in and manipulate the sample, or the person could go into a positive pressure suit that they would put on.
Now, the Department of Homeland Security seems boosterish on having Plum Island for this facility based on there being not much livestock in this area, while there's a lot of livestock in the sites of the other 5 finalists. On the other hand, if some of these diseases also affect people too, and they're serious, life-threatening diseases with no known cures or vaccines, and there's so many people in this area, I mean, just consider the megalopolis between Boston and New York, and here's Plum Island right in the middle. Don't you think Plum Island might be a risky place for a biosafety level 4 facility?
I think that Plum Island provides some additional security for diseases such as foot and mouth disease that are transmitted by aerosol, but I think it demonstrates by CDC being in the middle of Atlanta that you can operate these biosafety level 4 labs safely in an environment, because technology is today that you can remove these viruses and bacteria and other agents with the technology that we have in our new laboratories. Technology's improved a lot since Plum Island was first built 54 years ago.
In the draft environmental impact statement, the Department of Homeland Security says that accidents will happen no matter what efforts are made to prevent them. They'll occur. Do you agree with that?
The thing about it is that there's always risk in any operation. But what you do in a facility like Plum Island, if you look at our facility right now, we have a box within a box within a box. And it all comes down to people training in a facility. And so if you build the right facility, and you have redundancies in your security and with your safety, and you have the right people hired and they're trained, as you can see our people are trained here today on the simple process of shipping a sample, you can operate safely. And what you have to remember is that these facilities are not the risk to the community. The risk is to the scientists working inside them. It's just like a hospital. You can have people that go to the hospital and they can have deadly flu, and they can be in isolation in the hospital, but they're no threat to the people down the block.
We live, however, in an age of terrorism. And here's Plum Island, a very exposed island in the middle of a lot of marine traffic. I mean, it's, what, 10 miles or so from New London, a mile and a half off eastern Long Island. A terrorist could rather easily land on that. I mean, I'm not letting out any secret. The General Accountability Office spoke about, the Government Accountability Office spoke about that potential. Isn't that an issue?
The Government Accountability did a report. Based on that report, we conducted risk assessments and have greatly expanded and improved our security at Plum Island. So I feel totally confident in the security that we have there now.
There's been, a number of accidents on Plum Island, particularly the one in 1978 where, the hoof-and-mouth disease got out of the laboratory facility and apparently infected some cattle. And there's been a number of mishaps in which there's been within the laboratory itself, some spread of problems. With that track record, do you think you guys are ready for going Biosafety Level 4?
I think what you have to look at is that Plum Island was built 54 years ago, based upon the technology at that time. To go 54 years and only have one release, when you have animals outside of that facility for 35 years and only one time do you get an agent outside of that with something as contagious as foot and mouth disease, I think that's an admirable track record. It's unfortunate that it occurred, and today we no longer keep any animals outside of our facility. So we've even reduced the risk more. So I feel that Plum Island has a great track record on the way. There's been no pathogens that come off that island in 54 years that have got into the mainland. And what everybody needs to understand is that Plum Island is there to protect this nation. It's not a threat.
Ms. Norton, what do you think about Plum Island becoming a Biosafety Level 4 facility?
I'm totally against the upgrade to Bio-Level Safety 4 at Plum Island. I don't think the facility is in any position to be upgraded. For one thing, on the eastern end of Long Island, we have no possible evacuation procedure. And for another thing, there is not the level of security or oversight necessary, even presently, for the Bio-Level Safety 3 lab, to say nothing of Bio-Level Safety 4.
But the Department of Homeland Security is saying, we're going to build a whole new building for hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, you'd get a new structure. I mean, that wouldn't do it for you?
No, it wouldn't, actually. And as a matter of fact, the site selection process that was put into place and congressionally mandated, actually there were federal committees that did intensive and rigorous oversight of all the potential sites. Oddly enough, Plum Island was not included in the first 29, the first 18, the last 5. It was only tacked on later by the Department of Homeland Security, which means that it has not been vetted in the same way that all the other potential sites have. I see the upgrade as a real potential threat to the area, and I think it's really being considered seriously by the Department of Homeland Security. Were it not, then we've been made fools of.
Will Plum Island become the site of the new Biosafety Level 4 National Bio and Agro Defense Facility and become even more dangerous? Will it happen even though area residents are so opposed? The Bush administration says a decision will probably be made by the end of the year. This has been a special report on WVVH TV, Hamptons Television. I'm Carl Grossman. Thanks for watching.